My 7 eyes locked onto the voting board, and for the first time in 300 cycles of service, I forgot how to breathe. The numbers were wrong. They had to be wrong. I tapped my console twice, then 3 times, hoping the display would correct itself. It did not. The humans had voted to leave. I am Ambassador Corps of the Xyrathi Concordat, and I have served on the Galactic Alliance Council for longer than most species live. I have seen wars begin and end. I have seen plagues wipe out entire worlds. I have watched empires rise and crumble into dust. But I had never, in all my long years, seen a founding vote go this way. Around me, the grand chamber of Meridian Prime exploded into sound. Delegates from 400 species shouted over one another. The Krellian ambassador slammed his fist onto his desk so hard the surface cracked. The Glamirian representative let out a high, keening wail that made my ears ache. Even the ancient Vorth, who had not spoken aloud in the chamber for over a century, turned their silver heads toward the human delegation. And there she stood, Diana Whitmore, the human ambassador, calm as still water. She did not smile. She did not frown. She simply waited for the noise to die down, which took nearly 10 minutes. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, but somehow it reached every corner of that massive chamber. "The vote is recorded," she said. "Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Alliance, effective immediately." I wanted to stand up. I wanted to shout something, anything, to stop this, but my legs would not move. Because somewhere, deep in the back of my mind, a small voice was whispering that I had seen this coming, that we all had seen it coming, and we had done nothing. Let me tell you about the humans, as we understood them back then. 80 years ago, they had arrived at our doorstep in their strange, patched-together ships. They had only just learned to travel faster than light. Their technology was crude compared to ours. Their bodies were soft and fragile. They had only 2 eyes, 2 arms, 2 legs. They lived barely 100 years, which we found almost tragic. When they applied to join the Alliance, the Council laughed. Privately, of course. We were too polite to laugh in their faces, but in our private meetings we called them the baby species and the squishy ones. We gave them membership, but only the lowest rank. We assigned them the worst trade routes, the most dangerous border patrols, the frontier worlds nobody else wanted. And the humans, they accepted everything. They smiled, they thanked us, they got to work. I am ashamed to admit that I voted twice to limit human expansion rights. I told myself it was for their own good. They were young. They needed guidance. They should not grow too fast. Now, sitting in that chamber, watching Diana Whitmore gather her papers and prepare to leave, I felt something cold twist in my stomach. I did not know yet what I had done, but I knew, somehow, that I had done something terrible. Diana walked toward the exit. She paused once, turned, and looked directly at me. Our eyes met across the chamber, and then she said the words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "You will understand what we did for you only after we are gone." She left. The chamber fell silent. Even the Krellian ambassador stopped shouting. For a long moment nobody moved. Then slowly delegates began to file out. No one spoke. No one made eye contact. I returned to my quarters that night and sat by the window, staring out at the stars. Meridian Prime is a beautiful world, covered in crystal spires that catch the light of 3 suns. From my window, I could see the docking bays where the human ships were preparing to depart. Small ships, unimpressive ships, ships we had always dismissed as outdated. One by one, they lifted off. I watched them go. I told myself it did not matter. The Alliance had survived without humans before. We would survive again. We were the oldest, wisest, most powerful civilization in the galaxy. What could a single species, young and small, possibly take with them? 3 days later, I found out. The first message arrived at 400 hours, pulling me from a restless sleep. My assistant, a young Xyrathi named Pell, stood in my doorway with his face gone pale. "Ambassador," he said, "there is a situation on the outer rim." I sat up slowly, What kind of situation? A distress call, sir, from the Brenthari trade station in Sector 47. I frowned. Sector 47 was a quiet region. Nothing ever happened there. What kind of distress? Pell swallowed hard. Raiders, sir, the Skern. I felt all 7 of my eyes go wide at once. The Skern had not been seen in Alliance space for over 200 years. They were a scavenger species, brutal and fast, who had once terrorized the outer colonies. The Alliance had pushed them back decades ago. They were supposed to be gone, defeated, forgotten. Are you certain? I asked. Yes, sir, the Brenthari confirm it. Their station is under attack. They are asking for immediate help. I stood up and began dressing. Send the 3rd Fleet. Tell them to. Ambassador, Pell interrupted, his voice trembling. That is the problem. The 3rd Fleet is not responding. I stopped. What? We cannot reach them, sir. Their command ship is not answering our calls. A terrible feeling began to grow in my chest. Send another fleet, the 7th or the 9th. Pell shook his head. Sir, I have been trying for an hour. Every patrol fleet in the outer rim is silent. We are receiving no responses from any of them. I stared at him. My mind raced, trying to understand. Fleets did not simply go silent, not unless something had happened to them, something terrible. Pell, I said slowly, who commands the 3rd Fleet? He checked his tablet. His hand began to shake. Sir, the 3rd Fleet was commanded by Captain Henry Lockwood. And he is human, sir. Captain Lockwood is a human officer. The cold feeling in my stomach grew into something sharper. I grabbed my tablet and pulled up the fleet command roster, scrolling through the names. Captain Henry Lockwood, 3rd Fleet. Commander Alice Burton, 7th Fleet. Admiral George Redfield, 9th Fleet. Human. My breath caught in my throat. I scrolled further, deeper, through every fleet assignment in the outer rim, every patrol commander, every watch officer, every security chief. Humans, almost all humans. I had not known. None of us had known, because humans never bragged. They never demanded recognition. They simply did the work, signed their reports, and vanished into the background. We had assumed our own species were running those fleets. We had assumed our own officers were protecting our borders. But the humans had been doing it, quietly, for decades. And now they were gone. Ambassador, Pell whispered, what do we do? I did not answer him. I could not, because I was staring at the screen and I was realizing something that made me feel sick in a way I had never felt before. The Skern were not just attacking one station. If the patrols were gone, if the fleets were silent, then the Skern could be anywhere, doing anything. The outer rim was no longer protected. The colonies were no longer safe. The trade routes were wide open. And this was only day 3. What else had the humans been doing? What else had they quietly carried for us, without ever asking for thanks? My communicator chimed. Another distress call, this time from the Velari system, and then another from the Haldoran belt, and another, and another. They came in faster than I could read them. My screen filled with red warnings, with pleas for help, with reports of attacks and disappearances and systems gone dark. Pell stood frozen in my doorway, his young face pale with horror. Sir, he whispered, what have we done? I did not know how to answer him, but I knew, deep in my bones, that this was only the beginning. Whatever the humans had been protecting us from, whatever invisible weight they had been carrying for 80 long years, was about to come crashing down on all of us. And we had pushed them away. I walked to the window and looked up at the empty space where the human fleet had been just 3 days ago. The stars looked the same, cold, distant, uncaring. But now, for the first time in 300 cycles of service, I was afraid of them. The distress calls did not stop. They multiplied. By the end of the first week after humanity's departure, My office had received over 4,000 emergency transmissions from across Alliance space. My assistant Pell had not slept in 3 days. Neither had I. We lived on stimulant tea and fear, watching our screens fill with red warnings until we could no longer tell one crisis from another. The council called an emergency session. I was ordered to lead a fact-finding mission to the Outer Rim. I left Meridian Prime within 6 hours. Aboard a fast cruiser called the Starwind. Pell came with me. So did a team of 7 investigators from different species. We all wore serious faces, but I could see the truth in their eyes. We were frightened. The journey took 2 days. As we traveled, more reports came in. The Brenthari trade station had been lost. The Velari colony was under siege. An entire shipping convoy had vanished without a trace near the Haldoran Belt. And worst of all, no one had heard from Governor Maxwell Pierce of the Yelnari frontier colonies. Governor Pierce was human, of course. He had governed those colonies for 30 years. He was gone now, along with every other human official in that region. When we arrived at the first stop, the Glimerian trade hub of Silvora, I thought I was prepared. I was not. The station was in chaos. Refugees from nearby worlds crowded the docking bays. Food supplies were running low. The station's security force, once numbering 200 officers, now had fewer than 40, and every missing officer I discovered had been human. I met with the station's chief administrator, a Glimerian named Veles. He was an older member of his species, with silver fur and tired eyes. When I sat down across from him in his office, he did something I did not expect. He began to cry. "Ambassador Kor," he whispered, his voice breaking. "They are gone, they are all gone." "The humans?" I asked gently. He nodded. "Every single one. They packed up quietly and left on the same day. No goodbyes, no announcements, just gone." "How many were stationed here?" I asked. Veles checked his tablet with trembling fingers. 342 officially. But there were many more who worked unofficially. Volunteers, helpers, teachers at our schools, nurses at our medical center. The woman who ran our orphanage, a human named Margaret Foster, she had been here for 20 years. She raised hundreds of Glimerian children whose parents had been lost in the old raids. I stared at him. "An orphanage, humans ran your orphanage." "For 3 decades, Veles said, and they asked for nothing. No pay, no recognition. Margaret used her own savings to buy toys for the children. She celebrated their name days. She stayed up at night with them when they were sick. And we," his voice broke again, "we called her the strange little alien lady. We laughed at her for caring so much. Some of our council even complained that she was making the children soft with her hugs and her songs." I could not speak. I simply sat there absorbing his words. "And now the children cry every night," Veles continued. "They ask where Miss Margaret went, and I do not know what to tell them." I left his office feeling as if the floor had shifted beneath my feet. Pell walked beside me in silence. Finally, he spoke. "Ambassador, I have been looking through the station records. The humans here did not just run security and the orphanage. They also operated the medical clinic, the emergency response team, the search and rescue squad. They maintained the water filtration systems. They ran the community kitchen that fed the poor. He stopped, unable to continue. "Keep going," I said softly. "Sir, almost every service that made this station livable was being done by humans, quietly, in the background, without any recognition, and now none of it is being done." I closed my eyes. My heart felt heavy in my chest. We continued our journey. Every station we visited told the same story. On the Teethrin colony of Brightwater, humans had been running the school system for 40 years. A woman named Elizabeth Hartman had taught 3 generations of Teethrin children how to read. She had left behind a letter for her students. It said only, "Be kind to each other. I love you all." The children had made a shrine to her in the schoolyard. They visited it every morning. On the mining world of Kresh, human engineers had maintained the ancient tunneling systems that kept the colony alive. They had worked in dangerous conditions, deep underground, for pay that was barely enough to live on. Nobody had ever thanked them. When they left, the colony's mining operations collapsed within a week. Thousands of workers were suddenly without jobs. The local government had no idea how to fix the equipment. On the agricultural world of Pemberton Fields, a human family, the Claytons, had spent 60 years teaching farming techniques to the native population. They had brought seeds from Earth and shown the locals how to grow crops in difficult soil. Because of the Claytons, Pemberton Fields had become one of the most productive farming worlds in the Alliance. Now, with the Claytons gone, the farmers were lost. They did not know how to maintain the new crop rotations. They did not know how to fix the irrigation systems. Everywhere we went, it was the same. Humans had been holding up pieces of our civilization that we had not even known existed, and we had never once stopped to ask why. But the real horror came on the 5th day. Pell burst into my cabin aboard the Starwind, his face pale with terror. "Sir, you need to see this." He handed me a classified report. It was from the Alliance Central Records Office. Someone had finally decided to check the full history of human service in the Alliance. The numbers were staggering. Over 80 years, humans had lost lives defending Alliance civilians at a rate 60 times higher than any other species. 60 times. They had died in raids we had never heard about. They had fallen in rescue missions that were never reported. They had given their lives on worlds whose names we had never bothered to learn. And the Alliance, in its records, had labeled most of these losses as accidents or human recklessness. We had blamed the humans for being too brave, for caring too much, for throwing themselves into danger when wiser species would have stood back. I read the report 3 times. Then I set it down and stared at the wall for a very long time. "Ambassador," Pell asked quietly, "are you all right?" "No," I said, "I am not all right." I stood up and walked to the window. We were passing through an empty stretch of space. The stars looked lonely out there, scattered thinly across the black. "Pell," I said, "when we get back to Meridian Prime, I need you to do something for me." "Anything, sir." "I want every record we have on human service in the Alliance, every report, every casualty list, every mission log, every complaint ever filed against a human. I want to see all of it." "Yes, sir. May I ask why?" I turned to face him. "Because I think we have done something terrible, Pell, something we may not be able to undo." We returned to Meridian Prime a day later. The city had changed in our absence. Crowds gathered in the plazas. News screens blared with reports of chaos across the galaxy. The Krellian embassy had been stormed by protesters, though I did not know what the Krellians had to do with anything. People needed someone to blame, and they were lashing out in every direction. I went straight to my office. Pell had prepared the records I had requested. There were thousands of files, organized into tall stacks on my desk. I spent the next 2 nights reading them. I did not sleep. I did not eat. I drank cold tea and read until my eyes burned. What I discovered broke something inside me. The humans had done everything, not just the obvious things, not just security and teaching and farming. They had done the 1,000 small things that nobody else wanted to do. They had cleaned up toxic spills on worlds with poisoned atmospheres. They had volunteered for plague response teams when diseases broke out on isolated colonies. They had translated ancient texts that our own scholars had abandoned as too difficult. They had repaired old technology that our engineers called obsolete, keeping it running for communities that could not afford upgrades. And in every single case they had asked for nothing, no medals, no parades, no recognition. They had just done the work and gone home. On the 3rd night, I found something that made me put down the report and sit very still. It was a request form filed by a human officer named Commander Charles Whitfield 20 years ago. He had asked the Alliance to provide better safety equipment for his patrol unit. They were operating in a dangerous sector and needed proper shielding. His request had been denied. The reviewing officer, a Krellian bureaucrat, had written in the margins, "Humans can handle it. They always do." Commander Whitfield had died 6 months later, along with his entire crew, when their under-equipped ship was ambushed by raiders. The Alliance had recorded his death as an accident due to pilot error. I set the report down and put my face in my hands. How many Commander Whitfields had there been? How many humans had we thrown into impossible situations, knowing they would not say no? Knowing they would keep going until they fell? How many times had we written human recklessness in the margins of a report, when the truth was that we had simply used them up and discarded them? Pell knocked on my door. He came in carrying a cup of tea. He saw my face and stopped. "Ambassador," he said softly, "what is it?" I looked up at him. He was young. He had not been alive for most of this history. Whatever guilt I carried, he did not share it. But he was going to inherit the consequences of it, just as every other young person in the Alliance would. "Pell," I said, "sit down." He sat across from me. "The Council is going to ask me to recommend a course of action," I told him. "They are going to want to know how we can survive without the humans, what we can do to replace them, how we can rebuild what we have lost." "Yes, sir. I am going to tell them the truth, which is that we cannot replace them. We cannot rebuild what we have lost. Not quickly, not easily. We have been walking on a bridge that humans were holding up for us, and now that bridge is collapsing beneath us." Pell was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked the question I had been dreading. "Sir, do you think they will come back? If we apologize, if we beg?" I thought about Diana Whitmore. I thought about her calm face as she cast her final vote. I thought about the quiet dignity with which she had walked out of the chamber. "No, Pell," I said. "I do not think they will come back, not like before, and honestly I am not sure they should." He nodded slowly. He looked very tired. "Ambassador," he whispered, "I am afraid." "So am I, Pell," I said. "So am I." Outside my window, the crystal spires of Meridian Prime sparkled in the light of 3 suns, but I could no longer see their beauty. All I could see were the shadows between them, the dark spaces where humans had once stood, holding the weight of a galaxy on their shoulders, while we called them weak and small and strange. And now those spaces were empty, and something was coming to fill them. The panic spread faster than any news I had ever seen. Within 2 weeks of my return to Meridian Prime, the Alliance was unraveling. It was not war. It was not invasion. It was something worse. It was the slow, steady realization that the foundation of our civilization had been resting on human shoulders, and those shoulders had walked away. The Galactic Stock Exchange was the first great fall. On the morning of day 16, trading opened normally. By midday, it had collapsed by 70%. I watched the news reports in disbelief. Then Pell explained it to me. "Humans ran the exchange, sir," he said, pointing to a list of missing personnel. "Almost all the floor traders, the risk analysts, the compliance officers, the people who actually understood how the whole system worked, they left. No one knows how to operate the exchange now." "But we have our own financial experts," I said. "We have theorists, sir, people who studied economics in universities, but the practical knowledge, the day-to-day workings, the 1,000 small decisions that kept the market stable, those were handled by humans for 60 years, and we never asked how they did it." The exchange crash triggered a chain reaction. Banks began to fail. Shipping companies went bankrupt. Entire industries collapsed within days. On the wealthy core worlds, wealthy families suddenly discovered that their fortunes had vanished overnight. On the poorer colonies, workers lost their jobs by the thousands. Riots broke out on 6 different worlds. Religious movements sprang up like wildfires. One group declared that humans had been angels sent to test us, and we had failed the test. Another group declared that humans had been demons who had cursed us by leaving. Both groups attracted millions of followers within days. People were desperate for explanations, for meaning, for something to believe in. And still the distress calls came. Every day more systems went dark, more colonies cried out for help, more ancient enemies, long thought defeated, began appearing on our borders. The Vrexian slavers returned to the frontier worlds. They had not been seen in over a century. The rogue AI networks that humans had been quietly containing for decades began to reactivate. Strange creatures from the deep space rim, things we had only read about in old records, began to appear on the edges of our maps. I attended an emergency council session on day 23. The grand chamber was packed. Every delegate was present. The mood was desperate. The Krellian ambassador, the same one who had mocked the humans for years, now demanded that we send a delegation to beg them to return. His voice was shrill with panic. "We cannot survive without them. They must come back. We will offer them anything." The Vrexian representative, whose own species had caused humans endless trouble, now wept openly and accused the humans of cruelty. How could they abandon us? We were their allies, their friends. I sat quietly through these speeches. My 7 eyes watched the other delegates. I saw fear in all of them, but beneath the fear I also saw something else, something worse. I saw entitlement, the belief that humans owed us something, that their leaving was a betrayal rather than a consequence of our own actions. When my turn came to speak, I stood slowly. The chamber fell silent. "Esteemed colleagues," I began, "for 2 weeks I have listened to our debates. I have heard us demand that the humans return. I have heard us call them cruel, selfish, and treacherous. I have heard us plan how to force them back, or how to punish them for leaving." I paused. I looked around the chamber. "We are asking the wrong questions." The chamber stirred uncomfortably. "The question is not how to bring them back. The question is why they left, and the deeper question is what we must become if we are to survive without them." The Krellian ambassador interrupted me. "Ambassador Kor, we do not have time for philosophy. We need action." "You have had 80 years for action, Ambassador," I replied quietly. "You chose mockery instead. Now you want quick solutions to a problem that took decades to create. There are no quick solutions. There is only the slow, hard work of becoming the kind of civilization that does not need to be carried by others." The chamber exploded into shouting. Half the delegates cheered me. The other half demanded my removal from the council. The speaker banged his gavel for 10 minutes before order was restored. And then, as the noise finally died down, the ancient Vorth rose from their seats. This was unprecedented. The Vorth were the oldest species in the galaxy. They had been ancient when my own people were still discovering fire. They had not spoken aloud in the council chamber in over a century. They communicated through silence, through gesture, through the subtle movements of their silver forms. When they did speak, the entire galaxy listened. Their eldest, a being so old that no one remembered their name, stepped forward. His voice, when it came, was like the whisper of wind through ancient trees. "Listen," he said. "Listen to the Zarathi ambassador. He speaks truth." The chamber was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. "We warned you," the eldest continued. 1,000 years ago we warned you. When a species gives without being asked, you must ask why they give. You must honor their gift. You must learn from their example. You must not take them for granted. You must not make them carry what you refuse to carry yourselves." He looked around the chamber. His ancient eyes rested on each of us in turn. "You did not listen. You treated the humans as servants, as tools, as background features of your civilization. You laughed at their caring. You mocked their sacrifice. And now they are gone, and you are afraid." He paused for a long moment. "Good, be afraid. Fear is the beginning of wisdom. But do not waste your fear on trying to force them back. Use it to become worthy of them. Only then will any human ever look at you again with respect." The eldest sat down. The silence that followed was the deepest I had ever heard. After the session, I returned to my office. A message was waiting for me. It was encrypted with a human security protocol I had never seen before. It took Pell an hour to decode it. The message was short. It was from Diana Whitmore. Ambassador Corps, meet me. Neutral ground, coordinates attached, come alone. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I began preparing for the journey. The coordinates led to a small, nameless moon in the outer rim. It was an empty place, far from any trade routes, with nothing on it but rocks and dust. I traveled there on a fast civilian shuttle, alone except for a single pilot. I did not tell the council. I did not tell anyone except Pell, who cried when I said goodbye. "Sir," he whispered, "what if something happens to you?" "Then you will continue my work, Pell. You will remember what I have told you. You will help our people learn. Promise me." "I promise, Ambassador." The journey took 3 days. When I arrived at the moon, I expected to find Diana waiting in a small shelter, perhaps with a few guards. What I found instead made my 7 eyes widen in disbelief. The space around the moon was filled with ships. Not small ships, not unimpressive ships, not the patched-together vessels we had always dismissed. These were warships, hundreds of them, thousands, battle cruisers longer than mountains, carriers the size of small moons, strange, sleek craft with unknown weapon systems. The entire human fleet, which we had always considered small and outdated, was assembled here in numbers that made my breath catch in my throat. And these ships were different from anything the humans had ever shown us. They were bigger, more advanced, more powerful than anything in the Alliance arsenal. My shuttle pilot whispered, "Ambassador, what is this?" I did not answer. I could not, because I was finally understanding something that should have been obvious all along. The humans had never shown us their true strength. For 80 years, they had flown their oldest, smallest ships in Alliance space. They had hidden their real capabilities behind modest appearances. They had let us mock them. They had let us underestimate them. They had accepted the worst assignments and the lowest pay, all while possessing a fleet that could have crushed the entire Alliance without breaking a sweat. They were not weak. They had never been weak. They had been restraining themselves, holding back, playing small, so that we would not feel threatened, so that we could keep believing we were the greatest civilization in the galaxy. My shuttle received landing instructions and descended to the moon's surface. Diana Whitmore was waiting for me beside a small building. She was alone. She wore simple clothes, not the formal robes of an ambassador. Her dark hair was pulled back from her face. She smiled when she saw me. It was a tired smile, but a kind one. "Ambassador Corps," she said, "thank you for coming." I stepped out of the shuttle. My legs felt weak. I looked up at the sky, at the fleet hanging in the dark above us. "Diana," I said quietly, "what is this, all of this?" She followed my gaze upward. "This is the truth, Ambassador, the truth we never showed you." "Why?" My voice was barely a whisper. "Why did you hide this from us?" "Come inside," she said. "I will tell you everything." I followed her into the building. She sat me down at a small table and poured me a cup of something warm. It smelled like tea, but not any tea I knew. She sat across from me, folded her hands on the table, and began to speak. And for the next several hours, she told me a story that changed everything I thought I knew about humans, about the galaxy, and about what was coming for all of us. Diana Whitmore poured a second cup of the warm drink. It was called tea, she told me, an old beverage from Earth. I held the cup in my trembling hands and waited for her to begin. "Ambassador Corps," she said gently, "how old are you?" 342 cycles, I answered. "And how old do you think my species is?" I frowned. The humans had only achieved faster than light travel about 100 years before they joined the Alliance. Their civilization was young, very young, perhaps 200,000 of your years. Diana smiled sadly. "Ambassador, Humans have been a species for over 300,000 years. We have had advanced civilizations rise and fall many times. We have faced extinction events more than once. We have known war. We have known peace. We have known famine, plague, slavery, and every other horror the universe can throw at a species. By the time we met you, we had already learned lessons that your alliance has not yet begun to learn. I stared at her. But your records, your history, you said you were new to space travel. We were new to faster-than-light travel, Diana corrected. But we had traveled our own solar system for centuries before that. We had built colonies on Mars, mining stations on our moons. We had already faced crises of our own. When we finally reached the stars, we were not children. We were survivors of 1,000 hard lessons. I set down my cup. My hands were shaking. Then why? I asked. Why did you pretend to be less than you were? Why did you accept our mockery, our mistreatment? Diana was quiet for a long moment. She looked out the window at the stars. Because when we first encountered the Alliance, she said, we saw something familiar. We saw a civilization that was proud, rigid, convinced of its own greatness. We had been that civilization many times in our history, and we knew what happened when such civilizations met younger, more energetic species. They either crushed them or they were crushed by them. Neither outcome was good. So you hid your strength. We hid our strength, and we joined you at the lowest level as children so you would not feel threatened. We wanted to help you. We wanted to give you time to grow into something better before you had to face the harder realities of the universe. We did not want to replace you. We wanted to support you. Then why leave? I asked. Why now? Diana turned back to me. Her eyes were sad. Because it was not working, Ambassador. For 80 years we did everything we could. We patrolled your borders, we taught your children, we rebuilt your worlds. We carried every weight we could carry, and in return you grew weaker, not stronger. The more we did, the less you did for yourselves. The more we gave, the more you demanded. You stopped solving your own problems. You started expecting us to solve them, and when we did, you mocked us for it. She paused and took a long breath. A species cannot grow while being carried. We were doing more harm than good. By leaving, we give you the chance to finally become what you could be. It is cruel in a way, but it is less cruel than what would come if we stayed. I thought about this for a long time. I thought about the colonies that had grown dependent on human labor, the industries that had forgotten how to function without human workers, the children who had been raised by human teachers while their own parents complained about the strange little aliens in their schools. She was right, we had become weak, and the more humans did for us, the weaker we had grown. But there is more to it than that, Diana continued. Is there not? She nodded. There is, and this is the part that will frighten you. She reached into a small bag and pulled out a data crystal. She set it on the table between us. It glowed with a soft blue light. 30 years ago, she said, a human exploration fleet ventured far beyond the galactic rim. They were mapping the dark spaces between galaxies. They encountered something out there. Something. An entity. We do not know what to call it. It is not a species, not really. It is something older, something that feeds on civilizations. It moves slowly, but it is very patient. When it finds a galaxy with advanced life, it enters that galaxy and begins to consume it. World by world, star by star. It takes centuries, but by the time it is done, nothing remains. I felt cold, and this entity is coming here. It was coming here, Diana said. 30 years ago, our exploration fleet encountered it. They realized what it was, and they made a choice. They could not defeat it, not directly. It is too large, too ancient, too strange for our weapons to harm, but they could delay it. They could build a blockade, a ring of ships and stations far beyond the rim that would slow its approach. And you have been holding this blockade for 30 years. Yes, we have rotated fleets out to the blockade continuously. It has cost us many lives, many ships. We have kept it completely secret because we did not want to frighten the Alliance. We thought we could hold the blockade indefinitely. We thought we could protect the galaxy without anyone ever knowing. What changed? Diana's face darkened. The entity has grown. We do not know how, but it has gotten stronger over the past decade. Our blockade is no longer sufficient. We would need to double our fleet commitment just to maintain it, and we cannot do that while also serving in the Alliance. I understood finally. That is why you left. That is why we left. We had to make a choice. Continue serving the Alliance and watch our blockade fail, or pull back our forces to the blockade and leave the Alliance to face its other problems alone. We chose the second path, because the entity, if it breaks through, will be so much worse than anything else in the galaxy. How long? I asked. My voice was barely a whisper. How long until it reaches Alliance space? Our best estimates suggest 8 months. Perhaps less, if the blockade fails entirely. I closed my eyes. 8 months. 8 months before something we could not imagine arrived at our borders, and the humans, the only species who had ever faced it, had pulled back to fight it alone. Why are you telling me this? I asked. If the Alliance knew, we would panic. We would demand your return. Diana smiled. It was a thin, tired smile. Because the Alliance cannot face this threat as it currently is. You need to change. You need to grow. You need to become something more than you have been. If we simply came back and fought this thing for you, we would die doing it and you would learn nothing. You would still be the same arrogant, dependent civilization you were before, and the next threat would destroy you. She leaned forward. Her eyes were intense. But there is another option. Humanity will not rejoin the Alliance, not as we were, but we are willing to work with species that prove themselves, species that learn, species that step up, species that stop expecting others to carry them. She tapped the data crystal on the table. This crystal contains everything we know about the entity, our tactics, our weapons designs, our failures, our successes, everything. Take it back to Meridian Prime. Show it to your council. Tell them the truth. If they listen, if they are willing to change, then we will work with them. If they do not, then we will hold the blockade as long as we can, and may your ancestors watch over you. I picked up the crystal. It was warm in my hand. Why me? I asked. Why not send this to the entire council? Because you listened, Ambassador, Diana said. You listened when the Vorth eldest spoke. You listened when you visited the colonies. You listened to the children crying for their human teachers. You have been listening for weeks now, and you are one of the few delegates who has understood what you were hearing. She stood up. Our meeting was ending. Ambassador Core, she said, I want you to understand one thing. We do not hate you. We do not blame you. We know that change is hard, and we know that species, like individuals, can be slow to learn. We still care about the Alliance. We still want you to survive, but we can no longer do the work for you. The choice is yours now. I stood up as well. My legs felt unsteady. Diana, I said, is there hope, real hope? Can we actually face this thing? She considered my question for a long moment. Yes, she said finally. There is hope, but hope is not a guarantee. It is a possibility. It depends on what you choose to do in the next 8 months. Choose wisely, Ambassador, choose quickly, and most importantly, choose together. She walked me back to my shuttle. As I was about to board, she stopped me with a hand on my arm. One more thing, Ambassador. Yes. The humans who served in the Alliance for 80 years, the teachers, the soldiers, the doctors, the governors, they did not hate your people. They loved them. They loved the Glamirian children they taught. They loved the Teethran farmers they helped. They loved the Zyrathi engineers they worked alongside. When we left, many of us cried. We did not want to go, but we believed it was necessary. I looked at her, Margaret Foster, the woman who ran the orphanage on Silvara. She really loved those children. Diana smiled. It was the first real smile I had seen from her since the council vote. Ambassador, Margaret Foster is my aunt. She raised me after my parents died when I was 7. She is one of the kindest souls I have ever known. When we pulled her out of Silvara, she refused to leave at first. She wanted to stay with the children. We had to convince her that it was necessary. She cried for 3 days. My throat felt tight. Tell her that the children still love her, that they built a shrine for her in the schoolyard, that they visit it every morning. Diana's eyes glistened. I will tell her, thank you, Ambassador. I boarded my shuttle. As we lifted off from the small moon, I looked out the window at the massive human fleet hanging in the stars above. I understood now. I understood everything. These were not enemies. These were not betrayers. These were a people who had learned, through hundreds of thousands of years of hard experience, how to love a younger species without destroying it, how to help without replacing, how to protect without controlling, how to leave when leaving was the only way to save everyone. I looked down at the data crystal in my hand. It glowed softly in the dim light of the shuttle. Back to Meridian Prime, I told the pilot. As fast as possible. We have much work to do and very little time to do it. The journey back felt shorter than the journey out. My mind was racing with plans, speeches, arguments I would need to make, species I would need to convince. I did not know yet if I would succeed. I did not know if the council would listen. I did not know if we could change quickly enough to save ourselves. But I knew I had to try. Because a species that had loved us enough to hide their strength for 80 years, who had carried us on their backs without complaint, who had finally left us only because leaving was the kindest thing they could do, deserved at least this much. They deserved to see us become something worthy of their sacrifice. I closed my hand around the data crystal. I would not fail them, not this time. The stars streamed past my window as my shuttle accelerated toward home. I arrived at Meridian Prime 6 days later. The council was waiting for me. They had been notified of my return, though I had not told them where I had been. Pell met me at the spaceport, his young face pale with worry. When he saw me, he ran toward me and grabbed my arm. Sir, what happened? Where did you go? There are rumors. Some say you defected. Some say you were abducted. The Krellians are demanding your arrest. I patted his shoulder gently. Pell, calm yourself. I went to meet someone, and I have information that will change everything. Take me to the council chamber, now. He nodded and hurried me through the crowded streets. Meridian Prime had changed even in the short time I had been gone. Protesters filled the plazas. Businesses were closed. Soldiers stood on corners, watching the crowds nervously. The city felt like a pot about to boil over. The council chamber was packed when I arrived. Every delegate was present. The Krellian ambassador stood as I entered, pointing a clawed finger at me. Ambassador Kor, you have disappeared for days without authorization. You will explain yourself immediately. I walked calmly to the center of the chamber. I held up the data crystal Diana had given me. I will explain everything, I said, but first let me show you something. I placed the crystal into the chamber's central display system. The room darkened. The holographic projectors came to life. And for the next 2 hours, every delegate in the Galactic Alliance watched the data Diana had given me. They saw the entity from beyond the rim. They saw its size, its strangeness, its hunger. They saw the human blockade, 30 years of quiet sacrifice, holding back something none of us had ever imagined. They saw the casualty reports, the failed attempts, the slow, terrible progress of the thing toward our galaxy. When the presentation ended, the chamber was silent. No one spoke. No one moved. I saw the Krellian ambassador sitting with his clawed hands over his face. I saw the Vrexian representative trembling. I saw the ancient Vorth nodding slowly, as if this confirmed something they had long suspected. I stepped forward to address them. Esteemed colleagues, for 30 years the humans have held back something that would have consumed our galaxy. They did this in secret. They did this without thanks. They paid for it in lives we never counted, in ships we never knew were lost, in grief we never shared. And when the burden became too great, they left the Alliance, not to abandon us but to hold the line longer, to give us a chance to prepare. I paused. I looked around the chamber. Every eye was on me. The humans will not return to the Alliance, not as they were, but they have offered us a partnership. They will work with species that prove themselves, species that change, species that stop expecting to be carried and learn to carry themselves. The Krellian ambassador spoke, his voice small and broken. What must we do? We must become the kind of civilization the humans can respect, I said. We must start doing the work they used to do for us. The unglamorous work, the dangerous work, the thankless work. We must patrol our own borders, defend our own colonies, teach our own children, heal our own sick. And we must do it together because no single species can do it alone. I held up my hands. I am forming a coalition. I am calling it the Listeners. It will be open to any species willing to commit to real change. Not words, not promises, action. We will begin today. We have 8 months before the entity reaches our borders. 8 months to become something worthy of facing it. The chamber erupted into discussion. Some delegates immediately stood to declare their species' participation. The ancient Vorth were first, then the Glamirians, the Tethrans, the Pemberton Fields Federation. Species after species, mostly the smaller ones, the ones who had always been grateful for human help, stepped forward. Others resisted. The Krellian Empire hesitated. The Vrexian Concordat argued that they could handle the threat on their own. The great merchant houses of Orion refused to commit resources. For every species that joined the Listeners, another held back, clinging to the old ways. It did not matter, we had enough. We began the work. The first months were harder than anything I had ever experienced. My own people, the Zyrathi, had to learn how to maintain systems we had always outsourced. Our engineers, long accustomed to easy work, suddenly found themselves crawling through ancient machinery, trying to figure out how humans had kept it running. Our medical staff had to rush to rural colonies where human doctors had once served. Our soldiers, who had spent generations guarding comfortable core worlds, now had to patrol dangerous frontier routes. We failed constantly. In the first 2 months, we lost 6 ships to raiders. We lost 3 colonies to plague outbreaks because our medical response was too slow. We lost thousands of lives to accidents, mistakes, and poor decisions. But we also learned, slowly, painfully. We learned that the humans had not been lucky or magical. They had simply worked hard, shown up every day, and cared about the outcomes. And we found that we could do this too. It was harder than we had expected. It was less glorious, but it was possible. By month 4, the Listeners had grown. More species joined us as word spread of our progress. We established a joint command structure. We rebuilt the patrol networks. We trained new emergency response teams. Our casualty rates began to drop. Our colonies began to stabilize. And then in month 5, the humans made contact. It was a small gesture at first. A human engineering team arrived at one of our struggling colonies and offered advice. Not help, advice. They showed our engineers what they were doing wrong, then stepped back and let our people fix it themselves. A week later, a human medical team visited another colony and did the same thing. They taught. They did not replace. Slowly, quietly, humans began working alongside the Listeners, not leading us, not carrying us, walking with us, teaching us when we asked, letting us struggle when struggling was what we needed. I met with Diana Whitmore again in month 6. She came to Meridian Prime for a brief visit. She looked tired but pleased. We walked through the city together, watching our people rebuild. "You have done well, Ambassador," she told me. "We have much more to do," I replied. "Yes, but you are doing it. That matters." She stopped walking and turned to face me. "The entity is accelerating. It will reach our blockade within 2 months. The blockade will fail. When it breaks through, we will need every ship, every soldier, every capable person in the galaxy to face it." I nodded. I had expected this. We will be ready. You will not be fully ready, she said honestly, but you will be more ready than you would have been, and that may be enough. When the entity arrived, it was worse than anything in the data crystal had prepared us for. It did not have a single form. It was a thing of shadows and hunger made of many parts, each one the size of a moon. It did not attack like an army. It flowed like dark water, consuming everything it touched. Planets went silent when it passed. Stars grew dim. The battle lasted 40 days. Every species that had joined the listeners fought. We fought beside humans, not behind them. Our ships flew in formation with theirs. Our commanders coordinated with theirs. I myself served on the bridge of a Xyrathi warship in a joint command with a human captain named William Harper. We lost many ships, many lives, many worlds. But we won. Not by being strong, by being together, by refusing to give up, by doing the impossible, mundane work of defending each other over and over again for 40 straight days. When the last fragment of the entity was destroyed, I stood on the observation deck of my ship and looked out at the battlefield. It was a graveyard of ships, both human and listener. Captain Harper stood beside me. He was wounded. So was I. Ambassador Core, he said quietly, we did it. Yes, William, we did it. Together. Together. We stood in silence for a long time, watching the stars. The galaxy that emerged from that war was different, harder, crueler in some ways. Many species had lost much. The old alliance was gone forever, replaced by something new and uncertain. The listeners had become the core of a new association, one built on shared work and mutual respect rather than hierarchy and pride. Humanity did not rejoin us formally, but they walked beside us. They were partners now, equals, not saviors, not servants, friends in the deepest sense of that word. I am old now, even by Xyrathi standards. I have retired from active service. I spend my days writing. I am putting down this story so that future generations will know what happened, so they will understand what we lost and what we gained and what it cost us to become who we are. Pell is grown now. He has his own children. He leads the Xyrathi delegation to the new association, and he does it well. Sometimes he visits me in my quiet home on the coast of my homeworld. We talk about the old days, about the mistakes we made, about Diana Whitmore and Margaret Foster and William Harper and all the others. Margaret Foster, by the way, returned to Silvara a year after the war. She visited the shrine the children had built for her. She hugged the grown orphans who still remembered her songs. She wept with them. Then she went back to Earth. She is still alive, I am told. She is very old now, but happy. Diana Whitmore visited me once a few cycles ago. She sat in my garden and drank tea with me. Real tea this time from Earth. We talked for hours about the future. Ambassador Core, she said at one point, do you ever regret what happened? The years of pain, the struggle? I thought about her question for a long time. I looked at my garden, at the flowers that grew there, at the distant stars visible in the evening sky. No, I said finally. I regret what came before. I regret the 80 years of taking you for granted. I regret the mockery, the dismissal, the way we used your people without ever seeing them. But what came after, what we became through that struggle, I cannot regret, because we are better now, truly better, not because we are more powerful, but because we have learned to see each other, to work together, to do the quiet, hard work of keeping a civilization alive. Diana smiled. Margaret always said that the children on Silvara were the sweetest she had ever known. She used to tell me stories about them. They miss her still. I know she misses them too. We sat in silence as the sun set. The stars came out one by one. They looked different to me than they had in my youth. They were no longer simply beautiful. They were a responsibility, a shared task, a home we all had to work to maintain. I am writing this now because I want the young people to understand. The children who were not born yet when humans left the Alliance. The ones who grew up in the new association, who do not remember the old arrogance. I want them to know. A civilization is not held up by its laws, its treaties, its great leaders. It is held up by the quiet hands of the people who do the small, necessary work every day. The teachers who come in early. The doctors who stay late. The engineers who fix what is broken before anyone notices it was broken. The neighbors who check on the sick. The strangers who stop to help. For 80 years, humans did this work for us, and we did not see them. We did not thank them. We mocked them for caring so much. And then they left, and the stars panicked, and we learned the hardest lesson of our long history. If you are reading this and your civilization has people who quietly carry its weight, find them, thank them, learn from them, work beside them. Do not take them for granted. Do not assume they will always be there. Because if they leave, you may find that you were never as strong as you thought, that your greatness was resting on shoulders you never looked at, that your pride was just a story you told yourself, while others were writing the real history in their daily sacrifices. I am Ambassador Corps of the Xyrathi Concordat. I have served on the Galactic Alliance Council. I have witnessed the greatest crisis in galactic history. I have seen my people humbled and then rebuilt. I have fought beside humans and I have wept beside them. I have been wrong and I have been forgiven, and I have tried to become worthy of that forgiveness. This is my story. This is our story, remember it. The stars are still above us. They are still beautiful, but they are no longer simply ours. They belong to everyone who does the work of keeping them lit. May you do your part. May you see the quiet ones. May you honor the givers. And may you never, ever learn this lesson the hard way, as we did.